You are alone. Not the kind of alone you feel in a quiet room or an empty house. The kind of alone that has no edge, no shore, no sound except water and wind and the slow creak of wood beneath your feet. You haven't seen land in 4 months. You haven't spoken to a woman in longer than that. You haven't slept a full night since you left port. Your body is burning through itself. Salt, hunger, exhaustion layering over each other until the line between what is real and what your mind is building starts to soften. And then you see her, half human, half something else, rising from the water like an answer to a question your brain had been asking for months. Christopher Columbus wrote it down on January 9, 1493. He noted, almost apologetically, that she was not as pretty as they are depicted. He was looking at a manatee. We have spent centuries treating mermaids as a story. A charming invention, a sailor's fairy tale, something cultures told their children about the mystery of the deep ocean before science arrived to explain it away. But here is what that explanation misses entirely. Mermaids didn't appear in one culture and spread outward. They didn't travel along trade routes or get carried in the cargo of ships. They appeared everywhere. Assyria, 1000 BC. Ancient Greece, West African coastal traditions, Chinese mythology, Scottish folklore, Caribbean legends, Polynesian sea spirits, indigenous cultures across the Americas. Every civilization that lived near deep water independently produced the same creature, half human, half fish, rising from below. No contact between them, no shared language, no borrowed mythology. The same hallucination, across every ocean, for 3,000 years. That is not a story. That is a pattern. And patterns in human behavior don't come from the water. They come from inside the brain that was looking at it. In 1493, Christopher Columbus was on his return voyage from the Americas when he recorded the first documented European mermaid sighting in the New World. His exact words described creatures that rose from the sea with human faces. He was disappointed by how they looked. Marine biologists have since confirmed what Columbus saw were almost certainly manatees, large aquatic mammals that nurse their young above the waterline, have humanoid facial structures, and when seen from a distance by an exhausted sailor at dusk, produce a silhouette that the desperate human brain is extraordinarily willing to complete. But Columbus was not unusual. A historian named Adrienne Mayor spent years studying how ancient cultures interpreted fossil discoveries and unusual animal sightings. What she found was consistent. The human brain under extreme conditions does not report what it sees. It reports what it expects, what it needs, and what its accumulated mythology has already prepared it to recognize. The brain, in other words, is not a camera. It is a story machine, and when you deprive it of sleep, food, human contact, and familiar landscape for long enough, it starts generating the story on its own. Here is the first layer. Every culture that produced a mermaid myth shared the same conditions: proximity to deep water, dependence on the sea for survival, extended periods of isolation, and regular exposure to large marine mammals, manatees, dugongs, sea lions, and monk seals, that share enough anatomical features with humans to trigger the brain's most powerful recognition system. The fusiform face area, the part of your brain dedicated entirely to finding human faces. It is so aggressive, so overtuned, that it finds faces in clouds, in wood grain, in the surface of toast. Scientists call this pareidolia, the tendency to impose human pattern onto random visual information. Put a sleep-deprived, malnourished sailor in a small boat after 4 months at sea, and show him a manatee nursing its young above the waterline at dusk. His fusiform face area does the rest. Now here is the second layer. The myth didn't just appear. It evolved in a specific direction across every culture. Mermaids were always dangerous. They lured sailors. They drowned men. They pulled ships beneath the surface. In almost no tradition were they simply neutral creatures of the sea. Psychologists studying the myth through the lens of Jungian archetypes suggest the danger element wasn't added for drama. It was a cultural warning system, a way of encoding the genuine psychological threat that the ocean represented. The mermaid became the story a civilization told itself about what the sea did to men's minds, which means the myth wasn't describing a creature. It was describing a symptom. Now here is the third layer, and this one lands differently. The oldest mermaid story on record comes from Assyria around 1000 BC. A goddess named Atargatis loved a human shepherd. She accidentally caused his death. Overwhelmed by grief, she threw herself into a lake, intending to become a fish entirely, to disappear into the water and leave her human form behind. The water refused. It would only take her lower half. Her human face, her human grief, her human love remained above the surface. That is not a monster story. That is a story about the part of you that cannot be submerged no matter how deep you go. Every culture that told a version of this myth was telling the same story. You can go to sea. You can leave everything behind. You can go so far out that land disappears and the sky and water become the same color. But the human part follows you. You have never been on a ship for 4 months. But you know what it feels like when the brain starts building things that aren't there. The face you see in a stranger that looks like someone you lost. The voice you think you heard in an empty room. The dream so vivid it leaves a residue on the morning that takes hours to dissolve. Your brain is doing the same thing Columbus's brain did. It is taking incomplete information and finishing the picture. It is scanning every surface for something human, because finding something human means you are not alone. And being alone, truly alone, is the thing the human brain was least designed to survive. The Mermaid was never about the ocean. It was about the terror of looking out at something vast and empty and finding nothing that looked back. Every version of that myth, from Assyria to Scotland to the Caribbean, was a brain refusing to accept that the world could be that indifferent. So it put a face on the water. And the face was almost human, almost. Here is what I keep returning to. Atargatis went into the water to disappear, to stop being human, to leave the grief and the love and the weight of it all beneath the surface where no one could find it. And the water gave her back her face. 3,000 years of the same story. Every ocean, every culture, every civilization that ever sent a person out past the horizon and waited to see if they came back. The same creature rising from the same water. Not because the ocean is full of monsters, but because the human mind, pushed far enough toward the edge, will always build something to look back at it. The question isn't whether mermaids exist. The question is what it means that we needed them to.